I talk about deep identity change in my newsletter. We speak about everything from charisma. We speak about everything about building a personal brand. We also tell you guys practical mindset shifts, frameworks, daily activities that you can do in order to build up these stats that I was talking about earlier. Click the link in the bio if you're tired of pretending to be someone and you actually want to become the sort of person you want to be. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Whether it's your favorite superhero, public figure, or even fictional character in a book, every single person has a weakness. Superman had kryptonite, Gatsby had love, mine was alcohol. So this video I wanted to talk about drinking. Big popular culture here in the United Kingdom. So I initially started drinking at 18 years old. This was on my way to university. So I wasn't like some of you guys who probably started drinking at 16. I generally had my first drink around 17, just turning 18, right? This was on the road build up to going to university. And my first drink was something like a WKD. I think those drinks are like 4.5 alcohol percentage. And I've never been a heavy drinker. I was pretty much a lightweight from the very jump. I'm not really that tall, so I'm guessing the alcohol either got to my body quicker, or I don't know how alcohol works, but forget the complications, right? And I believe that everybody who starts drinking starts to drink for a reason. Usually it's either because you're very introverted and you're using it as a way to sort of get out of your shell, begin speaking to people, maybe interact with people who you wouldn't normally speak with, say things you wouldn't normally say when you're sober. Maybe it's because it's a good way to belong in the group that you're in. One thing that alcohol does give people is if you go into a room with people with multiple different personalities and you put a bunch of booze there, eventually through their drunken state, they're gonna find some sort of similarities with each other and have a conversation or maybe laugh at the same things, or it won't necessarily be a conversation that's going anywhere, but at least they'll be able to relate to each other. There'll be some sort of familiarity in the environment they're in and the activity that they're all sharing together. Or sometimes it's to build confidence. A lot of people really struggle with sort of putting themselves out there, and alcohol is a great way for them to sort of put themselves out there, and it's a great way to speak to girls if you're a guy. I don't know if girls use alcohol to speak to guys. I don't really doubt it. I doubt it, but who knows, right? My reason for drinking was always because I wanted to fit in within the group that I was in. The example I gave earlier about how you can get multiple different personalities, but with alcohol there, you all sort of get along very naturally. This is what I found about it. The good thing for me is, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't really an introvert by the time I hit 18. I was more a learnt extrovert, that's what I call it, because during my childhood days, from like the ages of 3 pretty much to about 13, I was an introvert. I sort of learned how to be an extrovert through befriending the right people, the sort of guys who were a little bit more loud, weren't afraid to say what they wanted to say, weren't afraid to fight, weren't afraid to, challenge people's beliefs and things like that. When you hang around these sort of people when you're younger, you've got a major advantage later on in life because you're naturally going to pick up them characteristics. But mine was more for the fact that I always felt so different to a lot of people because I didn't believe that my personality had a one-shoe-fits-all sort of category. Yes, I was black, coming from an African background, but I didn't grow up with the traditional way which a lot of the kids in my school grew up with, where they're sort of beat by their moms are very strict, and etc. I was raised by a single mom. She was always working night shifts. She was barely home in the day. When we did speak, it was always, she would tell me off by actually talking to me. It was never really physical, for me at least. That's my experience. But we also had things in common with each other where, the sort of financial situation we're in, when we would see other kids and they're getting all these Christmas presents or whatever, and we say, yeah, we got this one game and this, and we could relate to each other because, our families pretty much were in a similar stage in the income that they was bringing home. So when I was drinking, what I was essentially trying to do is I was using it as a way that if I am around people who are different to me, that we're able to create an environment and an activity where we can all relate to each other one way or the other. And at first, when I discovered it, it was one of the greatest things in my life at the time. And that's because, like I said, alcohol is a great way for you to get out of your shell instantly. See, with any other type of social environment, when you're sober, you actually have to build into the night or build into the activity. You know, if you show up, let's say to meet your friends at, let's say you're going to your friend's house, right? When you first go in, you're not all jumpy, excited, laughing. What happens is you typically have a bit of small talk, you begin to build rapport. Over time, and you spending time with them, you eventually get to the point where you're all laughing, you're out of your shell, and it's sort of a build-up. It's not like a light switch. And alcohol is like a light switch. You drink it and you're instantly in that social mood. Well, at least that's what I found. However, as I started drinking pretty much in my late teens to early 20s to mid to late 20s, eventually alcohol stops being something that helps you loosen up and it becomes something that you just use for the sake of using it, at least for me. At first it was just maybe have 1-2 drinks with your friends, you get very tipsy because I was lightweight, and then you ride that wave for the rest of the night. But as you sort of start drinking more, your tolerance gets stronger and you need to drink more in order to reach that initial drunkenness that you had at the very start. Eventually, as I started to drink more, and my tolerance was sort of, getting stronger and stronger and stronger. At first, alcohol was giving me a lot on the front end and giving me so much on the front end in terms of charisma and stuff like that, that I never really thought about the repercussions of a hangover on the back end. But as I began to drink more, it also started to take away a lot of the benefits that I was getting on the front end. I was a blackout drinker, and for those of you who know about blackout drinking, I used to think when I was drinking at the time that blackout drinking is when basically you drink to the point that you pass out on the sofa and you're sleeping. To an extent, yes, that is true, but apparently blackout drinking is actually a conscious state. So what happens is you go about doing exactly what you want to do with your life. You maybe continue speaking with your friends, dancing, but you can't recall anything that's happening in the night. And that's scary because you could wake up and you have no idea what you did. And I would constantly have these sort of nights. So at first it was sort of like a crutch that I would use to be more social. But then on the back end, when I would wake up, I wouldn't even recall the people I spoke to, what we spoke about, what happened, where did we go for the after party, things like this. And this became a consistent theme in my 20s. And over time, I didn't really want to let it go because alcohol is one of those vices where it's globally accepted. If you say you don't drink, matter of fact, you get more stares for not drinking alcohol than you do if you drink it, right? With other habits, like smoking or drugs, you get a few people frown on you, you get friends who are like, why are you doing that, etc. But for drinking, this is widely accepted. So it's very easy to rationalize the decision to keep drinking. I've been sober now for 1 year and about 2 months when making this video. And during the year, I had the time to reflect. Now I've made the decision to quit alcohol altogether. I don't know if I'll ever pick up a drink, but intentionally, I want to stop drinking for good. What I've discovered over the time that I've stopped drinking now is that the biggest thing that alcohol takes away from you is it actually stunts your growth. See, I believe that there's certain skills you have to develop in order for you to go from a child to an adult, right? So when you're a child, you relate to people with, maybe a few jokes, your favorite cartoon, talking about yourself. But as you grow up, you begin to see there's a lot more different personalities in the world. You're actually going to have to learn to speak to many different types of people. You're going to have a vast range of experience in the world so that at least you can relate to multiple different types of people. If that's your goal at the end of the day, you're going to have to learn to communicate in a way that's not only authentic to you, but you also got to be congruent, where if you're in a certain social situation, in a job interview, you might not want to mention that you're always blackout drinking, right? So these are skills that you develop over time, and you develop them with practice in being in the world, living your life, actually being outside, speaking to people. You learn how to deal with people by dealing with people. I know it sounds simple, but a lot of us miss this point. So what ended up happening is, when you're drinking, what happens is you shut down the part of your brain that has to consciously learn these skills. You can be the most charismatic person when you're drunk, but if you haven't actually learned how to build rapport when you're sober, alcohol is being used more of a mask than it is to be used to actually let you get loose, right? And this is the biggest thing that it took away from me, that when I was 18, I actually had a lot of natural confidence when I came to university. Like I said, we used to go into the town center in my last video, and we would go speak to girls randomly. We would speak to strangers. You know, when you're a teenager, you just get a bus to a town you don't even know. You're speaking to people you don't know. You're trying to start fights with kids. You know, you got all this energy going around. So I carried that energy when I was 18. But then over time, when you begin to sort of fall into peer pressure, you're trying to be someone you're not, you're being shaped by the people around you, you forget who you are, and you stop that journey of self-discovery that's so important in order for you to be grounded in your own identity. And eventually alcohol becomes the thing you use to hide the fact that you haven't worked on these skills. So for a lot of you guys, maybe you've already started drinking, maybe you're about to start drinking, maybe you're years into your drinking, like I was pretty much. What I would say to you is this: if you're going out now to be social and you can't naturally be social without it, you don't know how to self-generate good emotions. You can't laugh when you want to laugh. You can't come up with subjects on the fly. You can't free associate and just speak about a subject on and on and on and on and on, and you need alcohol to do that. What have you actually developed? And at what point did you learn to speak the way in which you're speaking now? So for example, if your ability to build rapport is the same as when you are at 17 and then alcohol got introduced and now you're maybe, I don't know, 35, 40, if you look back at that, I wouldn't be lying to say that alcohol probably contributed to you stop working on that skill of being able to be charismatic over a long period of time. Alcohol has more negative impact than it has benefits. It does have benefits, and I would say if you're someone who's moderate, then this video isn't for you. But if you've clicked this video, I'm guessing there's something about it that is making you click this video, and maybe you might think, you know what, maybe there's an issue here. But I would say this. I would say try doing an experiment and just go out on a night out for once in your life with no booze, no alcohol, and try to have a good time. And very quickly you'll learn that you actually have a terrible time out when you're not drinking. And I want you to reflect on that. The first time that I went out and I didn't drink and I had a terrible time, I didn't think, you know what, I didn't like this club, or it wasn't this, or it wasn't that. I thought to myself, I don't know how to have a good time sober in an environment like this, which is basically built to stimulate a good time. You think about a club, the lights, the music, the people, the way you dress, it's all created to create a fun environment. And unless you have alcohol, you don't know how to have fun in that environment. See, as a kid, when you were put into a fun environment, like whether that's a playground with toys that were meant to facilitate you, you could have the time of your life just going round and round on the slide. But when you're an adult and you've got these environments which are built to also help you have fun when you're older, we struggle to have fun without some sort of substance to get us loose. And that made me realize is we lose that skill, that ability to just let go, be present, enjoy the moment, speak to random people. Sometimes it goes good, sometimes it goes bad. Sometimes you're awkward, most times you're awkward, matter of fact. I am, definitely. I find that socializing is like a muscle that you have to build over time, and learning to relate to people, learning to emotionally control yourself. Learn when you're in a good mood, when you're in a bad mood, what caused the bad mood, what's going to fix the bad mood, addressing inner demons that you're dealing with at the time. This is all something that you learn over time, and when you're drinking, and you're drinking to the point that, you know, you're able to have a good time, you're suppressing yourself and you're neglecting yourself of that opportunity to learn how to do that naturally. I believe you should look at life similar to how if you guys played RPGs when you were younger, right? Or even if you played a game like Street Fighter or anything else. In those particular games, each character has a group of stats, whether that's strength, power, maybe magic, charisma, charm, luck, defense, you know, all these different things. And I want you to look at your life and think that you have all these different stats, such as the ability to speak, communication, relatability, confidence, charisma, emotional control, discipline, presence. All of these things you can develop over your lifetime, right? And it's not going to be something that you max out literally overnight. Some of them are going to be better than others, similar to a video game. But when you're sober and you get to go out and you get to do that, you get to naturally build these skills. And then later on, if you decide to drink, that's up to you guys. But personally, I find that if you can work on these skills naturally, typically in a room full of people, people are just shocked at your natural confidence. I mean, you think about it on a night out, how many people are actually speaking to people without drink? And I don't mean starting a small talk, talking about what they do for work or this. I mean people who are generally out there having a good time. Very few actually have the ability to do that. So when you learn to actually build these skills up, then when you walk into a room, you're pretty much the outlier in every single room that you go into. That's something that I learned, and it took me all of my 20s to learn that lesson. I hope you guys can learn it a lot faster than me.